guys, so in longsword sparring, something that you often see in people who are trying to score cheap hits essentially on the opponent are one-handed strikes. By that I don't mean using the longsword like a one-handed sword with the hand at the top of the hilt here. I mean letting go with the back, letting go with the front hand and keeping hold with the rear hand. Now, first thing to say is, this is historical. There's nothing fundamentally wrong with it, okay? You can do it with cuts and you can do it with thrusts. But there is a weakness, and I'll demonstrate the weakness, okay, with my colleague Martin. So, say we're sparring away, we're fighting and doing stuff, and I take a cheap shot, bam, let's make it flat, Martin's leg, okay? He now strikes back at me after being hit in the leg, and I yoink my sword back, being in one hand and holding at the pommel end with a large, unwieldy sword in front of my hand. And it's very, very difficult to protect yourself from the afterblow. And I don't think it's any coincidence that in longsword sparring about 5 years ago, we didn't used to use the afterblow rule. The afterblow being that when you're hit in a bout, in sparring or competition, when you're hit, you have one tempo or maybe one step to hit the other person back. And what this is representative of is the fact that when people are hit with swords, they don't just instantly drop down dead. As we know from many documentary accounts, and indeed modern warfare and crime and such like as well, is that when people, even when they're mortally injured, they very often commit one or sometimes even 2 or 3 final actions before becoming incapacitated. Okay? So it's good fencing training and philosophy to be able to protect yourself immediately after hitting someone. Now, about 5 years ago, lots of people were doing these one-handed hits, both thrusts and cuts, and scoring cheap points, because back then we were mostly only doing to the first touch. And if you're doing it to the first touch, this is a very, very good way to get a good length reach advantage on the opponent and score a really cheap, sneaky hit on them. But once the afterblow rule came in, about 5 years ago, what people were finding is they were getting their first hit, but then they were getting hit back, and they couldn't bring the sword back quick enough to defend themselves. And so what we see now is that this one-handed sneaky snipe attack is used far less in sparring and in competition than it used to be, because it can't defend from the afterblow very well. Okay? Last thing I want to say about it is that whilst in the original treatises we see this being done with both a cut and a thrust, I personally, if it is done at all in my club, I much prefer it to be done with a thrust, for the very simple reason that with very little force, a point will go into an opponent. Okay? You don't need edge alignment, you don't need very much force, and the thrust is quite easy to control and easy to pull back again. Okay? If you do it with the cut, it has a swinging motion and tends to be less controlled, which is bad for you being able to bring the weapon back again and defend yourself or hit again. Okay? But equally, edge alignment is appalling when holding the pommel of a sword. When you hold the upper part of a sword, you have a cross guard and flap and edges of blade to feel that your edge is aligned in the cut. When you hold the pommel end of a sword, you can't feel the edge alignment. So although you can swing the sword in a kind of not very controlled fashion, being able to hit with the edge and actually cut convincingly with it, whilst you can do it, and I've done it in test cutting and lots of other people have done it in test cutting, it is a much less reliable way of wounding, holding the back end of a sword and cutting, than it is to lance out and thrust. Okay? So there you go, there's some thoughts on the one-handed holding at the back of the hilt longsword cut and thrust that's still sometimes done in competition, but used to be more popular before the afterblow rule was brought in. Cheers!